Welcome to the next edition of Meet the Streets, a podcast for documentary and street photographers. Today we meet David Collyer, an accomplished English documentary photographer based in Wales with a very interesting backstory. Now, David.
Welcome, everybody. Today we have the privilege of talking to David Collyer, who happens to be the 2021 Royal Photographic Society Photographer of the Year, among many, many other things. But again, that one, just Royal Photographic Society, just has such a cool sound to it, especially as an American. I might be living in France, but raised in the U.S., the Royal Photographic Society just sounds really cool. So beyond that, please introduce yourself and get just a little bit of background, and we're going to go obviously a lot farther from there.
Sure. Hi, I'm David Collyer. I've been a photographer for many, many years. I started off, first of all, in my early teens, bought my first camera in 1982, which was the classic Zenit E that everyone bought at that time. Did a gardening round in my local village, earning enough money to buy it. I came from a family that didn't have massive amounts of money, but I had lots of affluent friends who were all going out and sort of buying the latest Canons and AV1s and A1s, I think, at the time. And one friend whose dad owned an advertising agency had an A1, so he was like the local photographic god. But I managed to scrape together enough money to buy a Zenit E. What I did have, though, was I had the privilege of being the son of the local newspaper editor, which at the time was the biggest daily local newspaper in the country. And I think they had 2 or 3 full-time photographers and a picture editor working for the paper at the time. So I got to hang out in newsrooms and newspaper darkrooms, and I spent a lot of time out with the press photographers, learning how to take photos, learning how to develop film, learning how to put together a story. And my love kind of built from there, really. And I always tell people that if I'm a good photographer, it's because I've grafted at it. I spent a long time being a very, very crap photographer, trying to be something that I wasn't really, trying to be an artistic photographer, whereas actually really sort of deep down inside is what I am. I'm a storyteller, but I'm a documentary photographer. And it wasn't really until I was sort of well into adulthood that it began to click. And sort of 58 years now, after I won the documentary photographer of the year, every time I do a talk to people, I make this joke that it took me 35 years to become an overnight success. So
it isn't funny how that works.
And now I'm the father of a photographer as well. So
really,
it's kind of gone full circle. My son, who's currently in New York taking photos, did photojournalism course at university in London and now works at Goldsmiths University in their photography department. So
nice, that's cool. Yeah, oddly enough, my oldest daughter, who I never thought was going to have anything to do with anything I've ever done, has taken an interest in photography recently. So
it is lovely when you see it come out. I mean, my youngest he was 17, is a very, very good musician, and I'm an averagely okay guitarist, but a complete muso. I'm a music obsessive, basically. So he's kind of been hothouse down that route, but he plays guitar and bass to quite a high standard.
So you have 2 kids?
Yeah, I've got 2 boys, Frank, who's the 17-year-old, and Ned, who is the 24-year-old.
Nice. Yeah, so my kids, both of them are actually good at music. They seem to excel at that, which I don't have the faintest idea where they got that from, because neither me nor their mother has a single. I try. Again, my goal is to one day get good enough to be considered a bad guitarist. I'm not.
3 chords.
Yeah.
3 chords is all you need.
Yeah, I'm not good enough to be considered a bad guitarist yet. So one day I've got more guitars than. I feel bad for them because what I do to them can't be considered playing. But one day I have a good time doing it though.
I used to hothouse my kids when they were babies. I would put them in the cradle and I'd sit there and play Neil Young songs to them. So, they'd be like under a year old, having the needle and the damage done, wailed at them.
Oh, very cool.
Seems to have worked out. I just don't seem to have done them any significant harm. So it should be all right.
Again, one of them ended up as a photographer, and the other one's a good musician. So they're a good split.
Exactly. I must have done something right.
So again, that's great. So you started off young, was good, and you had a good role models and immersion in the whole thing.
Yeah,
So
it was just a really good environment to grow up in. I mean, and there's something really magical about newspapers, I think, and it's something, sadly we've lost now.
true.
Very few people buy newspapers, but not only do they give you a much broader sort of spectrum of the news, because you'd actually go through and you'd read a long form story, or you'd look at a photo essay. The days of the classic colour supplements at the weekends, you'd sit down and see what Don McCullum was shooting in Africa, or the current sort of photojournalists of the day and the big stories. Whereas now we don't. We look at everything on our iPads or on our phones.
Yeah.
And, we live in this crazy age where we look at one story and then the algorithm feeds us the next story that they think we'll be interested in. And we get fed news that tends to go along with our confirmation bias. So, I think that's one of the reasons why politics has become so polarized, is that people only read things that are fed. People are exposed to very, very little that actually sort of rocks the foundations of their belief system. There's a photographer over here called Brian Harris, who was the head of the photographic department in the Independent newspaper when it started up in the 80s. And I read something that he put on social media the other day where he had done a talk to, I'm being interrupted by one of my three cats now.
Okay.
So he'd done a talk to, this happens a lot. He'd done a talk to a group of people at a camera club, or I think it was a camera club somewhere up in the sort of the Midlands of England. And he said to people, right, how many people here buy a newspaper? And barely anyone. I think like two people put their hand up. And this is something that I've replicated when I've done talks to groups and got the same results. And he said, so if you're not buying a newspaper, where are you getting your news from? And everyone's response was that they got their news from their tablets or their phones. So he said, right, so how many of you will actually sit down and read an in-depth geopolitical analytical piece that's 1,500 words, 2,000 words, about something that's happening on the world stage? And nobody does, because all we do is we read the headline and then we read the first paragraph and then we scroll on to the next thing. And we're all so ill-informed, really, compared to how, the mass demographic was, even up to 20 years ago, I think, because we just don't gather our information in the same way. And, that's one of, in some ways with photography, there are more ways to get your work out there, but the real quality places to put your work are gone. And I think that's a real shame with the way the world has changed, really.
Yeah, the idea that these algorithms just feed you what you want, again, as you mentioned, information bias, it's definitely, I think, putting the greasing the wheels or greasing the skids of making everything go down. Because if you want to believe that the Earth is flat, once you search for that a couple times in Google, suddenly it's going to start, or YouTube, it's going to continue to feed you things that it thinks you want, because it wants you to stay there. All that really, they're not trying to democratize information. They're trying to get ad revenue. And so the longer they can keep you on there, they're going to tell you whatever you want to hear. With newspapers, and I read the New York Times for whatever anybody wants to read it. But I'm still a Times fan. And unfortunately, I'm sitting here in Compiègne, France, outside of Paris, and I don't get the New York Times, but I do get it on my phone, and I do read the long stories. And then if you find stories, that you didn't even know were happening. That was the beautiful thing about that. Tabloid, whether it was a newspaper or National Geographic or Time or whatever it was, wherever you were getting your information from, or looking at your photos, they put it in front of you, and you saw that's what you had to look at. So you were exposed to a broader spectrum of things that you might otherwise have seen than you would otherwise have seen, but it opened you up. Now, if you like one thing, you're only going to get that one thing, and it's focusing people in a way, not to use a photographic pun here.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's what was I going to say? So I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day who is a pharmacist, and my day gig is working in healthcare. So I'm an anaesthetic practitioner. So that's what I do to pay the bills. Whenever I get that classic British question, "What do you do?" I always say I'm a photographer who works for the NHS. But we were having a conversation about the COVID vaccine, and obviously there's tons and tons and tons of information on the COVID vaccine online. Most of it has absolutely no basis in science whatsoever, and it's grounded in conspiracy theory. And he said whenever he gets anyone who comes into his pharmacy and asks him about the safety and the efficacy of the COVID vaccine, because they've read lots of scare stories online about how dangerous it is, he always says to them, go away and Google, can cucumbers kill you? Because within half an hour, you will have, 1,001 different ways that you can die from, being exposed to or eating a cucumber. And that's the problem with the way the internet works, is it feeds you and feeds you and feeds you exactly what you want to read.
Right. Yeah. Again, to go again briefly down that road just a bit further, my wife had always talked about thinking our phones are listening to us, and I was like, oh no, it's probably just because again, the algorithms would figure out all these complex little things, and it figures out where you want to go. No, I'm actually that. After having said that for a while, it started to dawn on me. Obviously, they listen to you, because you can't say for them to say that it's not. Then when you go like, "Hey Siri" or whatever Android does, or Amazon's thing, then it wouldn't answer you. It's obviously listening.
I think what's interesting is how effective that form of information gathering is now, in that it will listen to you, and within a couple of minutes it's feeding you adverts that are tailored to what you've been talking about. Whereas a few years ago it would take a couple of days for it to happen. Now the classic, it was one of those sort of almost like an urban legend that, the phone listens to you, it's listening to everything I say and it's feeding me something. Maybe, or maybe you just looked for a new bed because you need a new mattress. But my partner is a cardiology specialist nurse, and a couple of years ago, she was getting incredibly stressed out by her job, and we were talking about ways that she could perhaps find something to do out of work that would de-stress her. And she grew up opposite quite a famous pottery in this country, and we collect studio pottery. So we were talking about the fact that maybe she should find some pottery lessons and have a go at throwing clay onto a wheel. Within 2 days, both of us were getting adverts on our phone for pottery classes and courses at St Martin in the Fields Art College, Arts University in London. So it does happen, because that's such a bizarre, randomly esoteric connection. There's no way it would have been made without it.
True. So earlier you mentioned that you just said country. Obviously, people are going to listen to an accent and they're going to make an assumption. But I know where you're based. At least what your website says. It says you're in Wales.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in Wales? Or are you
No,
in
I'm not Welsh at all. I'm English. So I grew up. I mean, like I said, Dad was a journalist, so we travelled around quite a bit. I was born on the south coast, but then moved up to near London, and then Dad's job we were £10 Poms. Dad came home in 1972, and when I was 5, and said, right, we're moving to New Zealand. And so we moved to New Zealand for 6 years, and then we came back. So I spent all of my teens in Surrey, which is just to the south of London. Then moved to London as soon as I could. Met my partner, moved to Bristol. When she came down to university, had a couple of children, and then sadly we split up, as happens.
So take that smile back.
Yeah, and I'm in Wales because they say that you only ever move for one of 3 reasons: work, women, or witness protection. And I moved to Wales for 2 of those reasons.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I moved to Wales because my partner lives here. So that's how. Yeah. But it's not a Welsh accent.
So hopefully, what's good? The only 2 people that I can think of that are Welsh would be Sean Connery and
he's Scottish.
And he's right. I forget that. So Catherine Zeta-Jones. I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Richard Burton.
Richard. Okay, there we go. So yeah. Okay, so my ignorance is just on full display.
It's all the same. Once you get outside England, it's fine.
Okay, so I at least know that Wales is another country, but the accent I'm unsure about.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult one. There's always a standard joke that whenever you try to do a Welsh accent, if you're not from Wales, whenever you try to do a Welsh accent, you always sound like you come from Bangalore.
That's funny. So again, I've been following your work for quite some time on Instagram, and it's outstanding. And you cross genres between. Again, obviously some street photography, but a lot of documentary, music, and then you've touched on where some of this is. I've noticed something recently that I hadn't, and that doesn't necessarily directly equate to photography, but I'm sure there's, again, no pun here intended, threads that they're bringing together. But as a catharsis, what is it that you do? I actually, it's kind of a loaded question. I know the answer to this, but
I sew. I absolutely love sewing. I find it. I do find it cathartic. I find it. I mean, I've always been obsessed with clothes as well. I mean, and I still describe myself as an old modernist. Really, I still ride my scooter and head off to Brighton with my friends and things like that. And just and that's kind of part of the theme behind my next book, 50 plus. But no, I love it. I mean, when I had my own business years ago, I got really stressed and I took up fishing, which I don't do anymore. But I used to find that when I fished, you don't think about anything else apart from watching the floats. You just sit there and wait for the float to bob under the water. And sewing's a bit like that. And I just watch the needle, and it's fantastic. And I've always loved clothes, and I'm also incredibly practical. I was an antique furniture when I decided that newspapers weren't for me. I went and worked in the antiques trade. So I was an antique restorer, conservator, and made musical instruments. So I've got very good sort of fine motor skills. And getting back into sewing again kind of gives me the same sense of satisfaction. I'm quite good at working out how things work in 3 dimensions. So I love it, and it's really satisfying being able to walk off down the street wearing a jacket that you've just made or a shirt. But and also I love bucking stereotypes as well. Most people, there's this ridiculous notion that if you're a man and you're so, then you have to be slightly effeminate or slightly camp or gay, and which is bollocks, really.
Yeah, it's bollocks.
All tailors, most tailors are men. Saddlers are men. It's just one of those. It's just one of those nonsense, stereotypical things. So
but it's funny. Do you again? We're in the same age group. So remember back in the 70s, Rosie Greer. He was a football player, American football player, who was on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big monster of a man. He used to love to knit.
yeah,
I remember when that came out, and just like, again, just shocked everybody. I'm like, Rosie Greer looks like all he does is he just hits people, and then he goes to sleep, and then he wakes up and he hits people. No, obviously that's not what a human being does. And so seeing behind the screen and recognizing that a person that you thought was making their money off of violence, basically, really the rest of the day is spent peaceful and knitting.
it reminds me of that line from Hurricane by Bob Dylan. Whereas he says it's my job, he'd say, and I do it for pay.
I do it for
when
pay.
It's done, I'd just as soon be on my way.
Yeah,
and that's it. We all have so many different strings to our bows. I mean, I've got a mate called Phil who's ex Special Forces, and he knits. And he knits partly because it helps him deal with PTSD and other things like that. But he loves it, and he makes clothes as well. I've got a picture of him sitting at my dining table with 2 needles and a ball of wool. Knitting. And I make this joke that he could kill me in 13 different ways with a ball of wool. But it's. But no, I'm thinking I'm kind of in the embryonic stages of putting a project together now, looking at men who sew. And also the reasons they do it, whether it's somebody like me who does it because I've always been obsessed with clothes and fashion and just love the dexterity of it, or surgeons or saddle makers or sail makers who are doing it professionally, or people like Phil who are doing it for a whole different type of catharsis, really. So
what I'm curious, so you started off in with your dad being in newspapers. You started off with photography, following along, becoming a newspaperman. When did medicine come in? Like, how did that get in there?
So
and did that come after your work with antiques? Or
yeah, absolutely. So 2008. So when the big sort of global economic crisis struck and the credit crunch happened in this country, HSBC Bank basically pulled the credit facilities from a lot of small businesses, and mine was one. So I really went to the wall more or less overnight. I got headhunted by a big sort of design cabinet making company to go and be a project manager with them, and then they lost big orders as well. And so I'd only been there for 3 months before I was made redundant. They did the right thing by me. They could have done it a week earlier and just got rid of me on the spot. But I was the last guy in on more money than a lot of the other guys that were there. But they did the right thing, and so they gave me enough redundancy that I didn't have to work for about 3 months. And I had 2 young children at the time. And my mum was a nurse, so I'd grown up in an environment where nursing was always a thing. And we nursed my grandparents at home after they'd had strokes when I was in my teens, which, in a small house with 2 siblings, was quite difficult. But actually, looking back on it now, was an incredibly rewarding process. And so I had to look for something else to do. And I'd thought about nursing, and I wanted to do a job that I thought sort of gave something back to the community. And then I found out about the job I do now, which is called operating department practice, which is specifically a theatre or OR based role. And so my skill set is kind of a cross between a specialist nurse and a paramedic, I guess, in terms of what I'm a kind of airway specialist, but I'm qualified to work in anaesthetics on the scrub side of the operation with the surgeon, or in post-op recovery. And so I do that, and
Interesting.
I've been doing that since 2009. Got a job at the sort of bottom of the ladder in theatres in the local hospital, and they financed me through university, which was great. So I've now got that sort of stable income, which enables me to work on photographic projects, which take 3, 4, 5, or 8 in the case of the one that's about to be published year projects. So yeah.
How many projects do you have? How many?
I've always got loads of projects.
So how many books have you published?
So I did. So the only book I've published so far is the All in a Day's Work, which is the book which came out about the COVID crisis.
Okay.
50 Plus, which is a book looking at men of my generation or our generation and how different we are to our fathers' generations, is actually at the design. I got the first draft of it last night from the publishers. So that's coming out soon. And that's kind of looking at, we're kind of privileged in that we've grown up in this post-war period where we've got the freedom to carry on doing the same things that we used to do. So, if you were a skinhead or an old mod or a punk or a hippie, you can still do that whilst holding down a serious professional job. And,
Right.
there's no sort of stigma in wandering down the street, sort of strutting in your finest clothes and hanging out with your mates and in record shops and things like that, which of course our parents' generation, they didn't really have that luxury. So it's always said that, the first teenagers were in the 1950s. And it's almost like, now, and it tends to be men because women seem to have to grow up more quickly. But we're kind of free in some ways to remain teenagers for the rest of our life. So it's just kind of a look at who we are as a generation of men, really. I think in some ways our generation are slightly more sort of radical and liberal and trivial in some ways than our children's generation are. They've kind of been forced into another era of having to be serious again.
Yeah, I was reading, or maybe I wasn't reading. I heard a whole study on why that is. Pardon me. About as far as generations that are, again, more conservative, if you want to say, and what has happened what's happening in the world that equates to this. And when there's more turbulence and more, and you've got world wars, you've got all sorts of stuff that seems to actually make people again grow up, maybe again more conservative or whatever it is.
Yeah, but I think they also live their whole life being scrutinized these days. So they live in a goldfish bowl. Everything they do, there's a camera on them, or somebody's there, with an iPhone documenting what they're doing. Whereas, when we were teens, you could go away for days on end and nobody would know where you are. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting. I think one of the privileges of youth is that you get to rebel against the older generation. But how do you rebel against a generation who were bouncing up and down to the Sex Pistols or skanking to the Specials? And you can't do it because you can't shock your parents anymore if we're this age. I always used to joke with my parents and with my kids that the only way they could shock me would be by voting Conservative and playing golf. And it's like, so far I don't think either of them have sunk to that level of depravity. But, how do you do it? How do you shock a 58-year-old who still spends too much money on clothes and rides his scooter to Brighton and he goes dancing around to bands and he was, you know.
Yeah, I get that. I grew up in the Bronx in the 80s, and my kids they grew up in single mother. She worked 2 jobs. I had a lot of free time, and I travel a lot on trains that looked a lot different than they do now.
Yeah,
there's a whole book. Like Bruce Davidson did a whole book on the New York City subway system in the 80s. So I didn't think anything of it at the time, but I look back and it just somehow, at the time, of course, it's dirty, it's grimy, it is what it is. You just going through it. You look back, and it's amazing how we can look at things with again rose-colored glasses. I think of like was it Times Square? I hated Times Square back in the 80s. It was awful. But now I look and think, wow, damn, I wish I was a photographer back at that time, because now it has no soul. It's one big corporate.
My classic image of Times Square, you know, if you ask somebody, you know, of my age who didn't grow up in New York what Times Square is, I just think of Dennis Stock's photo of James Dean walking down Times Square in the rain. You know, that's it.
Yeah, well, that's
romanticized notion of what it was.
That is a much better version of it.
Yeah, the reality. Yeah.
But what's good, the reality that I remember with photographs so damn well, because I've seen nowadays, I see people who took pictures back then who are roughly my age, and we went through the same thing. Maybe they're a bit older. This one guy who's a cabbie and had a camera on him all the time. I'm like, wow, what a great idea. I had a camera with me a bunch, but I never really thought to be a photographer. I kind of stumbled into it way later in life. So it was, I guess, it's a bunch of things missed. So there's a whole bunch of things ahead of me to document. So it's all good.
We have a romanticized version of the past, though, don't we? So we look at photos, look at street photography from that era, and the clothes look better, and the cars look better, and people look more quirky, and you know, so there is that whole sort of rose tinted. It's like a nostalgia for a past that never existed.
Exactly. Yeah. Actually, the movie Midnight in Paris, which is one of my favorite movies. The whole premise, again, not to spoil this for anybody who hasn't seen it or who may still want to see it, is that it's all about nostalgia and the idea that everybody seems to want, or so many people want to look back as if that was the best time. But if you went back to that time, the people in that time wanted to be at another time. So no one's ever actually happy with where they are. They always want to be either in the future or in the past, but never seem to be present. And that's a whole...
The grass is always greener on the other side.
Exactly. Being present is a whole... I think that's basically the whole premise behind Stoicism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think you've got to live for the day. And I think, you know, one of the most valuable life lessons that I ever had was being diagnosed with cancer in 2020. And actually that just made me think, you know, you've just got to get on with it. You've just got to live where you are, when you are, and make the most of you know what's happening in life. You know, there's no point wishing you were somewhere else, because you're never going to be. You know, or you're unlikely to be, or you particularly when it comes to time. But just crack on and do the things you enjoy doing, and make the most of where you are and what you've got. Really. You know, and I say that with a degree of sort of white Western male privilege, but you know, that's who I am.
Again, it's
federal words.
The hand you're dealt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So when you're out, do you often travel with your camera? Do you only go out? Do you grab your camera when you have specific projects in mind?
No, I'm rarely without a camera. These days I tend to... So it's interesting, because I don't really describe myself as a street photographer. I describe myself as a photographer who does a lot of work on the street. So a lot of the projects, you know, particularly sort of portraits of people that I'm shooting, I'm meeting people on the street, and I'm looking for leads that will lead me into different areas. So I've always got a camera of some sort on me. I shoot predominantly film, but I became very, very obsessed with the process of shooting film. So now I've made myself take a digital camera out with me a lot of the time. So, you know, I've got a Fuji X Pro 1, which I take out with me, which always has the 18mm lens on it. So, you know, that translates into 28mm in old money, I think. So I think I have that photographer's thing of being terrified of missing the shot. The day you don't have a camera on you is the day you see something. And there's a portrait of a guy in the book, a guy called Henry, who is an actor, and I spotted him for the first time in town on a Sunday morning when I was doing the shopping in the local supermarket. And he was this incredible guy. He's really tall. I mean, I'm 6'1". He was probably 6'6", skinny as a broom handle, skin tight jeans, pointy shoes, lots of gold jewelry, belt, gold framed glasses, and a gold topped walking cane
Wow.
with big H on his belt buckle. And I thought, this guy is absolutely perfect for the 50 plus project. And I didn't have a camera on me. So I raced home, which is about 5 minutes away in the car, threw the shopping bags through the door and down to my partner. I'm gonna go and find this guy. Grabbed my bag, drove around town, couldn't find him anywhere. And then about 3 weeks later, I spotted him again and photographed him. So I think there is that thing, you live in fear of.
Yeah, seriously.
But then it's fun. We walk in different ways. My son shoots everything, more or less everything, on a Pentax 6.7, and he doesn't. He's currently lugging that around New York, but he doesn't carry it everywhere with him. He's one of those photographers that works very specifically on projects. And he only takes his camera when he's shooting something specific.
Yeah, with a Pentax 6.7, if you're just strolling around with that,
that, by the time you're my age, you'll be
it's going to kill you. It's a great camera. It's a camera that I've always wanted, and for some strange reason, I could easily have gotten one a number of times. I've yet to pull the trigger on that.
Yeah, and he's very lucky. He did, when he was at university, he did some assisting work with a photographer called Barry Lewis over here, who's a bit of a legend. He was one of the partners in Network Photographers, the photo agency in the 80s. Just won a Lifetime Achievement Award, and Barry lent him a couple of 6.7s, which sort of long-term loan, which he's got and he uses. So
that's cool.
Yeah, very very cool. Yeah.
So, for the people watching, I'm sure that somebody wants to see some photos, not just two handsome, slightly older men.
Men in their prime.
So let me put the glasses on and look down here and try the screen sharing thing. So let me have you narrate this.
Okay, so it's ironic that we're going to start with this one because I didn't actually take this photograph.
However, it looks like you.
It is me, yeah. All the sort of eagle-eyed detectives watching will note that that's me. So, in 2020, when COVID's hit this country, I was doing what I still do now and working in anaesthetics. And I was part of the team that were intubating COVID patients to put them on ventilators in ITU and also emergency procedures that were coming through the operating theatres. Now, I had this romanticized notion that I was going to sort of stroll around with a Leica M3 and a light meter like Larry Burrows and photograph what was happening. But of course, that was totally impractical. But I did want to shoot it on film. So I had a small sort of Olympus XA3, which is sort of holding up here, the little sort of clamshell, which was perfect because it fitted on a lanyard around my neck, or it fitted into the pocket of my scrubs. And it was just a zone focus camera. It's got 3 settings on the front for different distances, and that was great because I was able to sort of photograph what was happening around me, and it was unobtrusive. So people at work knew I was a photographer. So they were kind of expecting me to make some work. But if I'd put a DSLR in their face, something, they would have acted in a very, very different way. The beauty of having such a small camera was that after a couple of days, it was almost like I had nothing in my hand whatsoever. People were so used to the fact that I had a camera on me, but also I could, the project was kind of turning the camera back on myself and my colleagues to kind of debunk this myth that we were kind of healthcare heroes, because we were just going to work and doing the job that we were trained and paid to do. We're kind of highly trained professionals, and obviously COVID came with some serious physical and psychological challenges as well. But all of this sort of kind of putting us on a pedestal didn't sit well with a lot of us. So the beauty of the little Olympus was that every now and again I was able to hand it over to a colleague and say, just take a picture of me now, frame it like this, and that was one such. I think I'd been in scrubs and PPE for about 6 hours at that point, and I was literally just kind of sat in a pool of sweat on the floor at the end of the operation.
Just a non-photographic point to that about heroes. It seems almost without exception, I've never met or heard anybody who would be classified a hero by the masses or whoever that's ever accepted that they were a hero, like that they were just doing a job. Like when I was in the military, people like during Desert Storm, people like, oh, thank you for your, and still to this day, I'm not sure why, but again, the thank you for your service thing, look,
Yeah,
it doesn't sit with me. I'm like, I don't even know how to handle it. But again, and that's not the same thing as you. It's the idea that was called firefighters that run into buildings and risk their lives. They do something that would be considered heroic, but they're just considering that they're doing their job. And again, it doesn't diminish it. It doesn't make it put it higher or lower. It just is what it is. And it's just funny that was called that. I'd almost say that as a thought that somebody who considers themselves a hero is usually not like somebody
probably a bit of a narcissist as well.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's again, it goes back to that thing. It's my job, he'd say, and I do it for pay. And when it's done, I'd soon be on my way. It was a challenging time, and but it is what we do for a living at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Again, and thank God for it. But yeah, again, not everybody can do these things. This is why my favorite expressions is an ass for every seat. And some people are good at one thing and they hate something else.
Totally. I mean, I also, when we have this conversation when patients come in, and it's one of the natural things that you ask somebody is, what do you do? Because we're all slightly obsessed with what other people do. And I hate it when somebody says, oh, I just do this or I'm just that. And I always say to people, there's no such thing, there is no just. We all are a vital cog in the machine. We all do a job that needs doing.
Right. It's totally
I couldn't be a firefighter. I couldn't be a soldier. I couldn't be a deep sea diver.
Yeah, again, and luckily those jobs are filled.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So my daughter, again, I was showing her these things. You sent them to me yesterday, and so I was flicking through, and she was looking, and she's that's exactly how she sits.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So this is one of my colleagues who's called Sarah, and so Sarah had been qualified for 6 months when this was taken. So she and a couple of the other members of staff were really thrown in at the deep end. I had a fairly sort of easy transition into professional life. They were thrown into a pandemic, and this photo was taken at about 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not saying that it's of the quality of Dawn McCullum's famous shot of the GI, looking straight at the camera with shell shock, but she's got that 1,000-yard stare on because she's still so tired, from the day before, and what she's seen and what she's going to have to face during the day, what she might face during the day. So this is the photo that kind of changed my life as a photographer, really. In that this, let me backtrack slightly. I've been doing a project when COVID came along, sort of photographing my neighbours in the street because we had to do this social distancing where we had to stay apart 2 meters. And I live in a terraced house, typical South Welsh terraced house, about 6 foot from the front door to the road, just pavement and sidewalk in between. And I thought, well, I'm going to go sort of introduce myself to the neighbours, and I'm going to do this project, social distancing project, where I photograph the neighbours. And the Guardian newspaper heard about it and wanted to publish it, and then everybody in the country had the same idea of doing something similar, so that went by the by. But the Guardian heard that I was photographing in a hospital and what I did for a living, and they wanted to photograph. They wanted to publish some of my work as a photo essay online. And so I said to them, "Do you think there's going to be any chance of getting it into print?" And their answer was very difficult to get anything into print at the moment. So a couple of weeks went, or a week and a half went by, and I didn't hear anything back from them. And then a notification pinged on my phone as I was having breakfast one morning, and it was that it was COVID in a rural district general hospital, and I thought, oh, that sounds like my work. So opened it up, and sure enough, there it was. And they'd used an essay that I'd written as well, and they'd used sort of 15, 20 of my photos in this online piece. And I thought, well, I'm about to cycle into work. I'll stop off at the local garage and buy a newspaper and see if it's gone into there. And so I pulled up on my mountain bike to the newsstand in front of the garage and looked down, and there were all the newspapers, and there was the Guardian newspaper, and that photograph was on the front of it.
Wow, that's cool.
And I just went, fuck, and almost fell off my bike. So I went and I bought every copy of The Guardian that they had in the garage. And I got to work and I opened it up, and I was parking my bike outside, and I opened it up, and I also had a double page spread as well. And they used every photo I'd sent them, and they'd used all of my words word for word. And I phoned my dad, who obviously was a newspaper editor, and he said, yeah, I saw your work online. And he said, very good. You should be very proud of yourself. And I went, yeah, I am. I said, it's really good. I said, and I got the front page as well. Now, I live in a small town of 12,000 people in South Wales called Abergavenny. And he went, front page of Abergavenny Chronicle. Excellent. And I went, no, I got the front page of The Guardian, Dad. And I could kind of hear him spitting his cornflakes out. And he said to me, do you realise what you've done? And I went, well, no, not really. And he said, you've put the biggest news story in the world on the front page of one of the biggest newspapers in the world. And that's something that, most photographers will never get a chance to do in their life.
That's true.
It kind of turned things around for me, really. I mean, it's opened so many doors for me. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you if it wasn't for that photo. I think
if you had, that photo is not why we're talking, because you've done. It's not because you're the 2021 documentary photographer of the year or anything. It's just you have a great body of work that you've shared on Instagram, which I happen to be trolling, and then I found it. So it's good. Whether you're a famous or not, what's good is not how I choose who I interview. Do I like your work? Do I think you have something interesting to say? You check all those boxes and have an awful lot more to say than that. So.
I'll take that. I'm happy with that. Thank you.
So move on to the next one, but that's great. It was a wonderful story.
So this one didn't make the first print of the book. So this is Lauren, who's another practitioner who had only qualified 6 months later. And this was kind of a joke scenario where we were at the end of a 12-hour day and we were stocking up theatres. And this is a box that surgical gowns came in. And Lauren was complaining about how tired she was, and we were just kind of messing around. There's always a really good sort of dark sense of humour in operating theatres, and it's not called theatre for nothing. It attracts people who are slightly larger than life or characters, and so she just got in this box and said, "Oh, I'm so tired, I can sleep here." And I took a photo where you could see her face. And she had her hands up in the air, and then I took this one where she put her head down. And I love this because she's got these incredibly long, elegant fingers, like a sort of a concert pianist. And I just really like the way they're framed in the flap of the box. But my mum was a nurse, and she said that of all of the photos that I took, this was the one that reminded her of just how tired she used to be after a really long shift. This one, I think, for me, it works on different levels. It works that it shows the tiredness, but it also shows that intrinsic sense of humour that you have to have when you work in circumstances like you do in a hospital during COVID, or you would have known, working in sort of theatre of war as well. If you lose your humour, then you can't survive. Really, that way lies insanity.
Yeah, I was a hospital corpsman was my job. So
what was it? Sorry,
a hospital corpsman. So my job was to put people back to basically it would be considered a medic. It's just the Navy's term.
Oh, okay. Right.
So it was just a matter of there are times
I've worked with a lot of people who did a similar job. Yeah,
and you find yourself
Yaki Dam
you just again it's just easier to make a joke no matter how dark the situation versus just imploding.
Absolutely, yeah, you've got to.
So, which phase of COVID was this? Was this during?
This was the first wave. So okay. These were published in The Guardian in May 2020. So these were all taken sort of between March and end of April.
Excellent.
That's during an operation. So a consultant anaesthetist, Jenny on the left hand side, and Kumar, who's a consultant surgeon in the middle. And I love this. I love the kind of the make do element that he's wearing a pair of DIY protective goggles because he didn't like the visors over his glasses, and so he'd gone to his garage and dug around to see what he could find and come back with these. But one of the beauties of working in a really small hospital as well is we're a very intimate team, and we bond together very quickly. There's no real hierarchy, I mean, obviously you're deferring to people if they're consultants or professors or whatever, but we work together and we play together, and so it enabled me to get a really sort of good intimate series of shots.
Excellent.
Kumar's wife was actually a consultant anaesthetist who very sadly died about 6 years ago of a brain hemorrhage, and she collapsed at work and died 4 days later. But I was working alongside her that day when she died, so it's like
that's awful.
Almost part of the family, really. It's
in this particular shot, I'm a big fan of using what's there, and I like. Basically obstacles and things. I'm just realizing that my cursor is right on your photographs. It's killing me. So I apologize.
That's really interesting, actually, because I was thinking when you go back and look at photos, there's always something else to be discovered in a photo. And I've only just noticed for the first time in the screen behind his head, there's the reflection of a hand of another operating surgeon.
Okay, I recognize the hand. It didn't dawn on me.
The white above the fingers is the cuff of the surgical gown.
Nice. Yeah, just thinking back in when photography first came around, painting was always idealized, and you never would put an obstacle in your photograph in your painting. And then when photographs came around, they were trying to be paintings, and they would try, but inherently you would end up with obstacles. And painting eventually started to copy. Like they were copying each other, so they started to paint with obstacles in the way, and while photographers were trying to photograph with a clean foreground. I'm always personally was a fan of finding something to vignette and to look through, because it always makes me feel like in a situation like this,
of a messy frame.
Yeah, it feels like you're there. There's a reality to this that's not even in a real situation sometimes, or maybe something isn't around. But if things are too isolated, it could be the feel that someone's going for, but just in general, I tend to like messy. I like what's called chaos. I like feeling like I'm actually there. And again, this does that.
I think one of the things about this style of photograph as well is because of the sort of intimacy of the environments that we work in, but also because of the sort of over the top PPE that we were having to wear, it was quite a claustrophobic environment. And I think this type of photo, and shooting with a wide angle lens as well, or a wider angle lens, right. It kind of lends that claustrophobia and sort of intimacy to the photograph as well. Translates. Mm-hmm. Now this is Laurie. Laurie's one of my favorite colleagues. So she obviously her 40th birthday. And she had come in to work on her 40th birthday, which is kind of a mark of the nature of the work that we do. But Laurie lost a daughter shortly before I knew her. So I started at the hospital in 2017. I think in 2016, she lost a young daughter who was 5 or 6 to a particularly nasty type of childhood cancer. Mm. And then I was diagnosed with cancer in 2020 as well, and we really sort of bonded over that and spent a long time talking about it. And whenever, so I'm going to do a little joke thing now. So whenever I go anywhere and do a talk about this photograph or these photographs, and I have this photo up, I always take a photo of the photograph of her and send it to her, saying, "Now look, you're now famous in Yorkshire, or you're famous in Lancashire." And the best one was when I had an exhibition in the Fuji shop in Leicester Square in London, and she was in the window of the Fuji shop. So I sent her a picture. So you'll excuse me if I now take a photo of this, and I can then send it to her tonight and say, "You're now going to be world famous because this is going to go around the world on a podcast." But yeah, but this is I was approached by the BBC recently. Saying that it's the 5-year anniversary coming up, and they'd like me to talk about one photo and hopefully get the person who's in it to sort of come along and talk as well. So this is the photo I'm going to choose for that.
Oh, cool! It's nice to see something that's lighter versus usually when you see something in photographs of people in the medical profession during COVID, it's always some form of tragedy, whether they're exhausted, whether there's the chaos.
You've got to have the light with the dark.
Right. So I saw, again, obviously I saw this when you sent it, but then I saw today that you had posted this. Again, because you leave it to governments in this particular time of our lives to do the wrong thing.
Yeah. They seem to have a knack and a talent for it, don't they, at the moment?
Right.
So this is Faye, and Faye is somebody I met 4 years ago when I'd sold a photograph to somebody in a nearby village. In fact, it was the photo of Sarah that was on the front page of the Guardian, and we went over there, and she introduced me to one of her neighbours, who was Faye. She said, "Oh, Faye would love to have a photo taken." And I said, "Who's Faye?" And she would come with me, and I'll show you. And Faye opened the door, and looking like this eccentric vision, and I just thought, oh my god, there's a photo. This is fantastic. And then I thought, well, Faye's transgender. Faye's openly transgender. She lives in the same house that she grew up in, and I thought there's a story to tell here, because Faye is the antithesis of everything that we see in the media about trans people. And, it tends to focus on androgynously beautiful or very fashionable or completely over the top young people living in metropolitan settings. And Faye's just this person who gets on with her life in a small village, working class background in South Wales, and gets on with all her neighbours and doesn't bother anyone, and just carries on living her life. And she's doing up the house that she lived in, which was actually in many ways quite an unhappy childhood for various reasons. And I just kind of thought, there's a really good story here about how actually Faye could sell the house and move out and buy somewhere that was all up together, and her life would be much easier. And so it's kind of an interwoven story of how she holds the house back and the house holds her back. But at the end of the day, she is transgender, but that's only one part of her story, right, really. But she does all of her own building work. She's terrible at answering texts and phone calls, and I hadn't heard from her for about 3 months. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go and do a welfare check and make sure she's all right. So I turned up at her house and I said, "Faye, I'm here to just here to make sure that you're all right, because you don't answer my texts." And she went, "Oh, fine." She said, "I said, what are you doing at the moment?" She said, "Oh, I'm making doors for the house." So normally this room is full of old motorbikes, because she restores motorbikes in the front room. So so she said, "Oh, I'm making doors. Come and have a look, whatever." And so she put this circular saw in the middle of the room. And I said, I said to you, I'm not coming here to take photographs, but this is just too good an opportunity to miss. So I'm crouched, you can obviously tell where I am from the position of that thing. I'm crouched on the floor at the business end of the saw, with a little Leica CL in my hand, trying to stop the dust. And Faye's idea of health, and I spent a long time, 22 years in workshops as an antique restorer. Faye's idea of health and safety is not the same as my idea of health and safety. So I was waiting for a bit of 4x2 to come and sort of smack me in the forehead. But but at the end of the day, you suffer for your art. I got the photograph, so
Well, again, she's using a table saw, and I
she is,
and it looks like that she's got all her fingers, so that's a good thing.
I know. I mean, whenever I get patients now that say they've worked as carpenters, I always ask them if they've still got their thumbs.
No,
and many of them don't. Okay, so this is Faye showing me a dress that she bought that she was going to a party in, and one of the fantastic things about this project for me is that there's this amazing level of trust that Faye has put into me, or put upon me, that she just lets me into her life to photograph anything, and she's totally open. She's totally she's totally receptive to me photographing anything, warts and all. And so, I can turn up at 8 o'clock in the morning when she's getting dressed, and I'll photograph her. All of her, her hormone treatments lying around, I can photograph those. And I've actually started shooting some of this project in color as well, because I've got a good friend called Abby Traylor Smith, who's an excellent photographer, and she's been saying to me, I want to see some of your work in color. Why are you always shooting in black and white? And I said, well, that's just who I am. I'm a black and white photographer. And she said, well, this project I feel would benefit from having some color in it, and I like a challenge. I don't like pigeonholing myself too much. And so I loaded some color film. I bought some very cheap color plus 200 from the local camera shop here, and I loaded some in, and I think it was the first time in 20 odd years that I put color film into a camera. And I turned up at Faye's door one morning, and she answered the door. And she had blood on her chin, and I said, "Oh, you got blood on your chin?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "I still need to shave every 3 to 4 days. Sometimes sometimes less, depends on how my hormone levels are." So you've cut yourself shaving. And she said, "Oh," and I said, "Can I take a photo of that?" And she went, "Yeah, absolutely." So, I sort of photographed her. And, if it was in black and white, actually, it could have been a bit of gravy or Marmite from her toast or anything like that. But yeah, so, I've got this incredible sort of bond with her, really. And I posted the photo today on Instagram. Because there's been a legal challenge in the British courts, the High Courts, as to what the definition of a woman is, because Scotland, very forward-thinking, said that anybody who's got a gender realignment certificate can be classified as a woman, which is obviously a gender term rather than a science term,
Right.
biological scientific term. But we've just got these ridiculous culture wars going on at the moment, whereby some of the most vulnerable people in society are being victimized and used as a political football. And so now the definition of a woman has gone back to being, in England, that, you have to be biologically born as a female in order to be able to call yourself a woman. And
as if that's one of the pressing issues of our time. Like you look at all the things going on in the world right now, and that is what you have to focus on.
But it's throwing red meat scraps to the heart of thinking, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And the really sad thing about it is that women have no more rights today than they had yesterday, but trans people have fewer. And it's really punching down, I think.
But it's also funny.
I do understand the more nuanced arguments, and people need to feel safe. But at the end of the day, a trans woman is far more likely to be attacked, or a cisgender woman is far more likely to be attacked by somebody who looks like you or I than they are by a trans woman in a toilet or a prison.
And that's the thing when they want to say they're trying to protect people. The people that need the protecting are the people that they're protecting, that they're guarding against.
Yeah.
When is the last time you've seen a trans person go on a rampage and shoot up anything?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there is so much rampant misogyny that needs to be dealt with in the world at the moment. I mean, you only need to go down the comments of anything on Instagram or Threads. I mean, Threads has become completely toxic. It's almost
that was quick.
X on, yeah. Who'd have thought it? Eh? It's almost like his X on steroids, isn't it? But there is so much rampant misogyny. In a world of Trumps and Tates and JD Vances and Elon Musk, the right wing in this country and Orban, and this kind of feels like, what's the point, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they if I recall, is it called the Save? What's the name of it? It's an interesting name.
One woman's journey.
No, not the project, but the law that just came out. It has a.
I can't remember. Yeah,
because it's funny when they're taking rights away, they find really clever names to make it sound. So that the people whose rights they're taking will actually vote for it.
Yes.
So I find that these things that are supposed to be there specifically to save women have not given women a single another right, and frequently they take rights away. But they say, "Oh, well, you're being saved from going to the bathroom with a trans woman."
I think
how is that being saved? First of all, I know what the inside of a lot of women's bathrooms look like for one reason or another, and they happen to have stalls and no one's looking at anything, and then you're doing washing your hands.
you live in France. I mean, I go to the continent fairly frequently. There's a lot of unisex bathrooms and toilets and things on the continent, far more than, and they're creeping in here as well. You go to a restaurant, you walk in the same door as a woman walks in, or it's, I don't know.
Even in the U.S., there's a bunch of places. I lived in Arizona, the last place I lived in the U.S., and you would think, again, just right off the bat, that would have to be all the stereotypes you'd imagine. But really, there were a bunch of places I went in, like bars and whatnot, and you'd have unisex bathrooms.
Yeah.
So that everybody, literally, everybody goes into their bathroom and they come back out, and then there's a trough sink or something like that. They're washing their hands shoulder to shoulder, men, women. And I'm like, so how is that any different?
I know. It's not. It's just something to pick a fight over, isn't it?
Of course.
It's just this ridiculous era that we're living in, where we've become so polarized, and anything that can be used to set one group of people against another is used by certain political demographics. And it's the same with immigrants. Every country is a nation of immigrants. America is, France is, Britain is. But if you can persuade one group of people that has very little, that another group of people that has very little or even less is out to get what they've got, then you've got power. There's a brilliant cartoon of Rupert Murdoch sitting in the middle of a table with a huge plate of cookies in front of him. And there's a guy in a hard hat and a high-vis jacket, white guy, sitting at the other end of the table, and he's got one cookie on a plate. And then there's a guy at the other end of the table who is clearly meant to be an immigrant because he's dark-skinned and quite scruffily dressed. So he's the typical, stereotypical right-wing media image of an immigrant. And Murdoch is turning around to the guy in the hard hat going, "Oh, mate, that immigrant wants to steal your cookie." Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? That's it.
That's the entire thing right there.
Each other. I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. He was talking about, bloody immigrants. And I said, look, my family were economic migrants. We moved to New Zealand in the 70s for a better life. I've got more in common with somebody trying to get here on a boat for a better life than I have with the people who are billionaires at the top of the tree trying to tell me that those migrants are trying to ruin my life. It's
yeah, if people would ever look in versus looking out, they'd realize how much more they had in common with again, far more people than everybody seems to want to be part of a club that would never have them as a member of that club.
Oh, totally.
So
I always say to people, I'm surrounded by migrants everywhere I go. Every day I'm surrounded by migrants. So one of them's a professor of surgery, one's a consultant anaesthetist, one's a nurse, one's porters. That's it, and they're all doing the jobs that people over here don't want to do or can't do. So
it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. That's life, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're definitely not on the other two. So this is your 50.
This is the 50+ project.
50 plus project.
Looking at men of our sort of age and who we are. And so this is a guy I photographed in the street in Bath, a guy called Ted, who he's actually 73, might have been when he took this a couple of years ago. So he was really keen that I showed his Keith Haring sweatshirt as well when I bought it, because he's a gay man, and he said men of my generation fought for the rights to be seen and to have equality, and so he was really proud of wearing that. And so I did a little experiment about 6 months ago, and I thought I'm going to go through some of these photos because I tend to shoot anonymously. So the project the project is. I think there's 83 people in the book. Most of them are anonymous, but there's about 12 of them who have actually written a little sort of biog about themselves. But Ted was anonymous. But I put this photo on social media. I think I put it on Facebook or I put it on Instagram, and just said, look, I'd be really interested to track this guy down. I knew who he was within 2 hours of it being online. About 5 people had contacted me and said, "Oh, I know Ted. He's a lecturer in textiles at a university in Essex," and so we had a conversation, and that's really like it. I love his glasses. There's so much joy in his face as well. I love approaching people in the street and asking if I could photograph them. And when I started out, I was quite shy as a kid, and the camera was, or awkward maybe more than shy, and the camera was a really good device to hide behind. Whereas now I use it as a device to meet people. And I find that most people, if you go and ask them if you can photograph them, are quite flattered that somebody wants to take their portrait. Particularly if you use the word portrait, because that kind of formalizes it.
Yeah, I agree with you. So far, I find the percentage of people that say yes with zero expectation of even receiving a photograph, because they say, "I'll hand them a card, say, here you can have. I want to get you this," and hardly anybody ever contacts back. It's so interesting to find out how many people will just walk down the street and be approached by a stranger with a camera. Again, if you smile, you say something nice, and people will, again, just for some strange reason, people seem to want to be photographed more often than not. And they're flattered.
I find that men are more receptive to it than women. And I think that's totally understandable. A middle-aged guy with a camera walking up to a woman in the street and saying, "Can I photograph you?" It's that. But also, I think there's that social expectation. When women have been programmed for so many years to look a certain way by the media, you've always got to look your best. You got your lipstick's got to be right, your clothes have got to be right. Whereas you could walk up to a 50, 60-year-old guy in the market who's got hair coming out of his nose and his ears, and his hat on back to front and gravy down his chin, and we go, "Yeah, I look good. Photograph me." And there's another classic cartoon where the guy, a bald guy with a huge beer belly and a pair of baggy old Y fronts, standing in front of a mirror, and an absolute Adonis with a six pack and a quiff looks back at him. And then there's a stunning woman who looks like Bridget Bardot looking in the mirror, and massive fat woman in sort of baggy knickers is looking back at her. So I think there is this thing that men go,
exactly.
Men walk out of the house going, "I am looking good today," and that's it. So this guy was Kingsley. So I met him in Brighton a couple of years ago. He's a white Rastafarian guy who had a shop in Brighton. He's now actually moved out to Ethiopia. But he's one of the ones that's written something for the book as well.
That's cool.
Really interesting guy. Daniel's a guy who lives in a canal boat on a canal nearby. He's an amazing carpenter, really, really good. Real gentle soul. He looks like the type of guy you wouldn't necessarily want to meet down a dark alley at night, but he's a big sort of hugger, big sort of bear of a man, and just a really lovely, gentle guy. I think his beard is currently bright orange, or it might be blue at the moment. But it's
those boats. I think I saw a special or something a little while back. We're talking about all the houseboats that are in and around. My wife and never she refuses, doesn't even like to entertain the idea. I think one of my fantasies is to have a nice houseboat on the Seine.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, of course. Apparently, the other part of the fantasy is that my wife would live with me, and neither of those things are going to happen.
She's not buying into that. Your wife is no stakeholder in your fantasy.
Apparently not. She's allowed in mine, but she just completely divests herself from some of them.
Women, eh? So this is the guy I photographed in Cardiff, and this was taken shortly after the October the 7th, and after Israel had gone into Gaza, and things were just beginning to get controversial at the level of Israel's response to October the 7th. And this guy, I was having a sort of long chat with him in the street because obviously he's very proudly Jewish, wearing his Star of David. So, but he's got a great coat. I've got a coat a bit like that I wear on my scooter on very cold days.
Yeah, we could talk for hours on the on what your conversation was.
Yeah,
So that's a whole nother. Yeah, I think maybe maybe over what's got a pint when I finally get over there. Hang on, actually, all you have to go is meet you in Wales. So
yeah. So this guy was taken. He's an Italian guy who was photographed outside Bar Italia in Soho in London. I was up in London with a friend being filmed for a film which is coming out. I think it's coming out on Netflix this year sometime, called Never Grow Up, which is made by a German film director called Nico Bayer, who started off as a music director. He did videos for The Verve and Oasis and Radiohead, and then he did a big Chevrolet advert for that was at the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. But he was a mod in Germany in the 80s, and he's still fascinated by the scene. So he's making a film about the sort of mod culture scene, modernist culture worldwide. And so friend and I had gone up to London to be filmed by him, and this guy was just sat outside Bar Italia. So I thought that's such a good look, that's with his 1970s Miles Davis shades on. So I thought I've got a photograph in there.
Yeah, so I read again that you're a fan of jazz. So am I.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I find I think it's kind of the way that I go about photography, but I think street photography frequently is and again a lot of the ways I do things, which is why I like street photography. But there's a component of jazz in the whole thing as far as improvisational versus again you just kind of everybody's playing their own part and you just all have to again make it work together. And
you've all got to get to the end point at the same time. That's it.
Yeah. And again, it seems to be what's chaotic to many, but it has a rhythm. It has all the nuance, and again, it makes music. Again, I like music. Not everybody likes it.
And also, I think with jazz as well is there's this amazing aesthetic to it as well. You look back to those classic photos, and I don't know whether you've seen it. The photos that W. Eugene Smith shot, the Jazz Loft, made in the 50s. I'm just stunning, just aesthetically, absolutely brilliant.
Gene Smith. There's so much stuff that he's done that was good. I'm just absolutely incredibly jealous of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's the daddy, isn't he? Basically, he's absolutely incredible. But there's a really good book that I bought recently called Black Ivy, which is looking at how black jazz musicians and cultural figures like Sidney Poitier and Paul Robeson and people appropriated the classic Ivy League look in America in the 50s and kind of put their own spin on it as well. That really sort of fascinates me. It's such a...
And so apparently with some the pictures, I had reordered this yesterday, and apparently it was with they chose to go back into their haphazard thing.
It's jazz, isn't it? We'll go from one stanza to another. So obviously, back to Faye, and this was one of the photographs where I sort of turned up at 8 o'clock in the morning and she was just getting dressed, and there was this amazing light coming through the window, and I just love the fact you've got that shadow of her leg, and where she's putting on her tights or her pantyhose, as the Americans would say, I guess, and just where it touches the floor, it almost looks like a sort of dog's leg coming down and just creating that shadow. But you can see that she lives in what most people would consider to be absolute chaos. But I've got my Hitchcock moment in this, because the book on the chest of drawers is actually my book, All in a Day's Work, that I did. So I've got a little cameo role in that photograph.
Very cool. When I saw this photograph, the first thing I saw, because you're looking at the whole again shadow and light, her stocking ended up looking to me like it quickly. Have you seen like when say people with above the knee amputations?
Yep.
That run.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So they have that kind of curve
going on. Yeah.
And so like the runners that are that run with that prosthetic, that looked like. And so when I first saw that, that's exactly what I thought it was. And I looked harder and I'm like, oh, wait a second, no, that's a stocking.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Yeah, and that's the beauty of a photograph, isn't it? There's so many different ways of looking at it. I mean, there was I can't remember who it was who said it, but a photograph is neutral, and it's not until somebody looks at a photograph that they infer, what they want from it, or they take what they want from it.
That's like what's that? Quantum physics. It's like
exactly, which is way over my head.
Observation is exactly, it locks things in, and until you observe something, then it exists in multiple states.
Yeah, totally.
Not cool.
And again, Faye with the sort of because she's a hormonal transition. Her skin is changing, so she's got lots and lots of sort of bottles of E45 everywhere but also because she's incredibly practical and she's doing all the building work on her house. The E45 is juxtaposed with an adjustable spanner, adjustable wrench, and a bottle of perfume as well. So you've got it all going on in that photo.
We got all of it. Those are great. Again, the backstories, and you got so much more. Again, we could be here for weeks if we're actually going through, again, a lot of your work. So this is for anybody watching, anybody listening. There's just so much more to dig into with David's work. So you really, in the show notes, I'm going to make sure that I've got links to your Instagram and your webpage.
I'm always delighted when people contact me to talk about work as well. To talk about any photo they want to ask me technical questions about how I do it, philosophical questions about why I do it. I love talking about photography, so anyone's welcome to contact me.
And the philosophy, I always find to be, everybody's got their own reasoning, and philosophically, I think with photography is, I don't know, I don't know. I can't even put it into words. There's just so many different levels if you are really into photography. I was a mentor for a group in Arizona. It was called Kids in Focus. These were kids that were in the foster program that were basically thrown away, and they were guarded. And so the woman that had started the program, a great photographer and a really wonderful human being, we would go to a school, and she would pay for it in the beginning. We eventually got donors. They would get a small Canon point and shoot. And we'd spend 8 weeks going in week after week, teaching these kids how to look at the world, not expecting them to grow up to be famous photographers. But more often than not, they started off completely closed up. But as we would show them how to basically use this as a form of just documenting their day, or like journaling, basically. And finding what's good in their personal world, there's moments of beauty, there's moments of clarity, there's things you can trust and people you can trust. And to the last one of them, every single time, we would get them to open up. And they would, and then the beautiful thing about photography is you don't need a camera. Like everybody thinks you need a camera, but the reality is it teaches you how to see. I think. Again, I could be wrong.
And it also teaches you critical thinking as well. It encourages you to look at the world from a different perspective. You're always trying to find a different angle for something, and you need to look at it in a way that somebody else hasn't done it, and that translates not just from the visual, but into the slightly more sort of ethereal way that we all sort of approach the world and deal with the world, I think.
Yeah. So you've got multiple forms of catharsis. You've got your photography. You've got your sewing. You've got your guitar and your mandolin that's behind you.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. As I get older, I've started to look at who I am as a person, and since I had the cancer diagnosis in 2020, which touch wood, I've been clear since 2021. But it's made me sort of analyze my life. And I was having a chat to, again, my friend Abby, who wanted me to shoot color, about neurodivergence and ADHD. And I said to her, I'm sure I've got elements of ADHD within me. And she goes, elements of it? She goes, you're absolute textbook. What do you mean? And I said this to my mum. Oh, for God's sake, of course you are. She said, you were that kid like Damien from The Omen that was peddling your trike out at 3 o'clock in the morning, And I think I've got a low boredom threshold. I need to be doing things. I need constant stimulation. And I've just become, I think a lot of people get less curious as they get older. I think I've become more curious as I get older. I want to understand things. Really. Yeah. And now I've got the confidence to go out and do it as well. I think that
I agree. I wish that more people. It does. I 100% agree that it seems that you look around and people as they get older, they get less curious. And there's the old expression that when you're young, you are just say liberal, but you're more compassionate when you're young. What's good? You're I don't know. You're maybe more accepting, whatever it is. As you get older, you become more conservative and you close up and you're trying more defensive. I find to me that in my life, I seem to be the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, likewise.
The more life experience I have, the more I look back and go, how could I have reacted that way in that situation? Now I'd be far more compassionate. I'm going to do it. And I bring more understanding as I get older. And I recognize that the world is not getting bigger and I'm getting closer to the end, not the beginning.
Totally. So I feel exactly the same way. Yeah.
So, really. Again, this is what I love about meeting people, and that's what I love. The reason I started doing a podcast is because I get a chance to meet people all over the world, and I don't have. I'd rather be there doing this over a pint and what's called. Instead, I'm sitting here in my with a glass. I'm in France. I have a glass of wine.
One of the benefits of I don't drink beer, so I drink wine. So I'm going to go and have a glass shortly. That's it. But I mean, I've met so many fantastic people through photography, and it's really interesting that ever since I sort of achieved a level of, I hate the word celebrity, but achieved a level of celebrity photography and being known. Everyone has been so nice. The only person there, which was actually really horrible to me, was the photographer on the newspaper when I was young, who was just narky old so and so. But no, everyone's been great. I've just met some really, really interesting people through it as well. And
I can imagine
everyone wanted to, I found myself I got invited to join a Facebook group during lockdown called the Photo Book Club, which was organised by a guy called who was it organised it? Colin Wilkinson was the publisher who asked me to come along and join it, and Tom Broadbent was the guy who was running the group. And so Tom Wilkinson had Blue Coat Publishing, who specialised in putting out documentary photography. Colin Wilkinson, sorry, and he said, "Oh, we've invited." I've invited David today because he's basically shot and published and put this book out within 2 weeks to capitalise on a news story, showing us all how it's doing. And I'm sitting there in this meeting with lots of people's avatars around. I'm going, "Oh my God, I've got their book on my shelf, and that's such and such, and that's such and such." And all these people who I'd looked up to all my life as documentary photographers, like people like Barry Lewis and Daniel Meadows and all these, and everyone basically reached down the ladder to help me up to the next rung. And nobody wanted to put their foot on my head and stop me from going. And everyone's just been brilliant. I suddenly find myself being invited to lunch at David Hearn's house, because he lives fairly close by, and that's quite surreal. You're sitting there opposite this Magnum legend, having a cup of tea and some lunch with him, and things like that. So
that's cool.
It has been nice.
So
I always try to pay it forwards as well. So.
It's funny how many people try to keep things secret, as if they have the one thing that's completely different. Everything is built on the shoulder that you're stepping on the shoulders of the people from before you.
Yeah.
So the idea that people are so secretive on certain things, it's a human nature thing versus, but it's awful. It's one of the baser instinct or aspects of human nature.
Totally.
But I want to, before we go, on publishing. So you've got one book out. You've got another one that you just saw. You're 50. You're over 50. You've got
50 plus. I got the first draft of last night, and so that's looking good. I'm really pleased with the way that's coming on. So that's being put out by a company called a publisher called Fistful of Books.
That's cool.
So we're just got to decide how we're going to do it. Whether we're going to put it out as a Kickstarter or just do a sort of straightforward sort of publication and go there. And then the book, One Woman's Journey, will be after that.
Excellent. How do you, in a nutshell, if you can, obviously there's a lot that goes into it, but if for people that want to put their work into a book, what kind of advice do you have?
I think the nature of book publishing has changed an awful lot, in that Kickstarter is a wonderful thing, and it enables people to actually really get out and publicize their work, and as long as you set realistic targets to actually gather the money together and do it. You've got to be fairly sort of social media savvy to get it out there. But a lot of people are making their own books now. I mean, I'm a massive fan of zines, because I think one of the problems with photography books is they tend to be incredibly expensive. Photographers tend not to earn much money. Photography books tend to be collected by photographers. And it's an expensive process to print really good quality books. And they tend to be fairly short print runs as well. So if you don't buy them straight out, it doesn't take long for a book that would have been £30 to be £150 if somebody really wants it. And so I think things like zines and sort of pamphlets is a great way to get work published. Do a few of those. Take them around to book fairs. There's lots of book fairs. I mean, if you in Britain, there's Bristol, Books on Photography. There's the London Book Fair, London Photo Fair, things like that. Photo London, Photo North, which has just been. I was lucky enough to be one of the principal photographers at Photo North back in 2022, I think it was. Yeah. there's always people, there's always publishers there, you know, selling their wares, but also looking for new stuff to publish. So my son makes his own books. I mean, when he did his degree, he made a fantastic hardback book, which is like the prize in my collection, called the Firefly Platform, which was like looking at liminal spaces in London. And he's now he was lucky enough to be chosen to go out and hang out with Gregory Halpern in Mexico, and a guy called Paul who has a book publishers there, and so they've said to him, you know, you shot this really good body of work in London, but you've also shot a really good body of work in New York. Why don't you actually combine the two and turn it into a sort of transatlantic project? So, you know, he's going to be working on that as well. So,
Cool.
but make books. You know, if you've got the dexterity, make books, or it's cheap to get them made now. Just get one or two made and take them around to publishers at fairs and show them. I'm lucky that, you know, when I had the book out first of all, and then I was approached by a publisher to do that, because he knew what work I was making in the hospital, and then of course that then won the documentary photographer of the year, and then I was made a fellow of the Royal Photographic Society. That kind of brought me a bit of currency, and then all of a sudden people are interested in my work, and so that made it a lot easier. But it's get yourself a decent pair of shoes. Get out there and pound the pavements and see people and put it in front of people. And I always say to people when I mentor younger photographers or new photographers, you know, one of the things that I always say to them is, don't be afraid of self-publicity, because you've got to get out there and sell yourself. Because there are so many people now in photography who, you know, wanting to, you know, because it is so easy to make books on short print runs. You know, there's so many people out there getting work. You've got to go out there and show your work and just try to have a different angle and slant on something as well.
Yeah.
If somebody's out there shooting red cars, you go out and shoot blue cars. You know,
or shoot it in black and white and see it.
Exactly. Color will never catch on.
Yeah, just change your filter and it'll look completely different. So, David, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, again, I appreciate just watching your work, but now getting to know you. And again, our little interactions through threads and Instagram here and there, but mostly I just stalk and appreciate your work. So,
well, I'm glad you did. It's nice to have a chat as well. Whenever I do a talk for camera clubs, I always get up and I say, it always amazes me that people are prepared to pay to listen to me talk when most of my colleagues would actually pay to make me shut up.
Cool. So again, I'm going to do my bit. I still haven't gotten over there. The only time I've even been in on the large island was going through Heathrow. So okay. I need to get out. Actually, now I've got the shuttle. I can just take
come and visit.
And then so I'm not sure exactly how far Wales is.
We must come to Paris as well. So
I'm not sure how far Wales is from London.
120 miles.
That's not that bad.
Which to an American is only about that far. So
yeah. I did a lot of driving back on that side, but yeah, as a New Yorker, usually the entire world is centered around that one little tiny city, which is it's a fairly large city. But every map drawn by a New Yorker is New York and the rest of the world.
Yeah. So my brother had a girlfriend once who I can't remember in the States where she was from, but it was backwoods Arkansas or something like that. And you know, we'd be down at my parents' house in Devon in the southwest, and she'd go, I'm going to go up and see, I'm going to go and see my friend up in Aberdeen. And I go, but that's like 700 miles. She go, and
that's beyond me. That would require some planning.
Yeah, not her.
Okay, so
all right. Look, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been the pleasure's definitely been mine. Thank you so much, and I'll keep in touch.
All right, mate. Take care.
Thanks.
Good. Bye bye.